Everyone in town knew everyone else, but nobody really knew Owen. Whether that was his fault was hard to say. He greeted people when he saw them, he was honest, he meant no harm, but he didn't get into long conversations. He gave short answers to questions. His lights went out early in the evenings. When he was waiting in line at the market, he just waited. And when someone said something to him, he didn't answer right away. He'd pause for a moment, think about it, then speak. In a small town, that was enough. People had already started talking. "He thinks too much," said one. "Full of himself," said another. The town's grocer, Pete, ran a small shop wedged in a narrow corner. Inside there was a wooden counter, the smell of onions, wheels of salted cheese on the shelves. Owen stopped by every Wednesday. Pete was a talker. Every time Owen came in, Pete had a question ready. "Settling in all right?" he'd ask. Or, "Made any friends yet?" Sometimes more directly, "Anyone looking out for you?" Owen would smile each time. "I'm fine," he'd say. He'd leave his money on the counter and go. Pete passed this along to others. The town read it as coldness. After a while, Owen noticed something. People avoided making eye contact with him. When he joined a queue at the market, the people next to him looked the other way. When he greeted someone on the street, he got a response, but it ended quickly. The town wasn't shutting him out exactly, it just wasn't letting him in. Owen was a woodworker. He had a small workshop outside of town among the pine trees. It had been converted from an old barn. Wide doors, high ceiling. He arrived early in the morning and came home late. He never moved on to the next piece before the current one was finished. His hands always carried a little sawdust. A thin line of wood grain stayed beneath his nails. Nobody had ever seen this. Nobody had ever asked. One Sunday afternoon, there was a small gathering in the town's shared garden. A few tables had been set up. There was food. Children were running somewhere in the distance. Owen came. He stood near a wall. He had a drink in his hand. He watched. He wasn't talking, but he wasn't absent either. He was simply quiet. Ray was at the center of it all. Loud voice, easy laugh, always at the middle of something. At some point, he turned to Owen. "I've never managed to have a proper conversation with you," he said. His voice was friendly. His eyes were not. "I've been wondering," he said. "Why do you talk so little?" A few people looked over. Owen held his glass with both hands. He listened to Ray. He didn't rush. A short silence passed before he answered. "I talk when I have something to say," he said. His voice was quiet, but there was something in it that didn't bend. Ray laughed, said something else. The subject moved on. The gathering continued, but something small had settled inside Owen. He had said the right thing, and he hadn't tried to prove it to anyone. Months passed. One morning, old George was standing at the workshop door. Owen barely recognized him. George stepped inside. He paused at the threshold for a moment. He looked up at the high ceiling, at the wide doors, at the timber on the shelves. He breathed in the sawdust hanging in the air. Then he walked to a few finished pieces. He ran his hands along the edges, looked at them quietly. Finally, he spoke. "I want a chest made for my son's wedding," he said. "Can I trust you?" Owen paused for a moment. "Yes," he said. He didn't add anything else. He didn't need to. The chest was ready 2 weeks later. Oak, hand-sanded corners, the lid sitting just right. George looked at it for a long time without speaking. He ran his hands along the edges, opened the lid, closed it. Then he put his hand on Owen's shoulder. He turned and left without saying a word. Owen stood at the workshop door. Outside it was cold. His breath was visible in the air. Behind him was the smell of sawdust, the sound of wood, the familiar quiet under the high ceiling. Ray came to mind. Pete came to mind. The first days in town came to mind. Then it all passed. The timber under his hands had always been more real. Not every room needs your explanation. Some people have already decided what they think, and no amount of words will change that. What you build in quiet will always speak louder than what you defend out loud.